Hello everybody, you're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. This is the weekly radio show where we chat about the local arts news. We have a different guest on each week. We head over to the Rhylight Zone for a short story and or some poetry, and we catch up with Twangling Jack Ford over in the Oak Shed for a weekly album review. As always, you can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. And we are repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please do leave us a short review on your podcast platform of choice. It all helps. You can also email me here at the studio by dropping me a line on dane.cobain at wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain at wickhamsound.org.uk. And I'm particularly keen to hear from poets, performers, musicians, people with local arts news, MP3s, people who might like to come on the show. Don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also find us on Facebook if you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound. So this week we are chatting to musician and film director Caio Cortonesi, but before we do that, we're going to head over to the Rhylight Zone for the latest instalment of Monsters of Rock by myself, Dane Cobain.
Chapter 9, Word Spreads, 1994. For a couple of months, life went back to normal. The band played a dozen more gigs, mostly on Friday and Saturday nights, and they shipped another 100 copies of the EP. The big news in the wider world was that Nelson Mandela had been named South Africa's first black president, while Kurt Cobain had followed Harry Nilsson and Bill Hicks into the afterlife by blowing his brains out in a garage. Graham was circumspect as usual. Well, at least we're one step closer to the top, he said. The summons from the Nameless One came out of the blue. The band had been practicing in the back room of the Rose and Crown when there was a pounding of the door, a distant shattering of glass and a rapid torrent of Orcish. Then a dozen of the brutes burst into the room, armed with crossbows and stinking of blood and bones. Groen groaned. "I think I know what this is about," he murmured. "The boss man says hello," one of the orcs said. Groen recognised him as the same orc who'd escorted him to the Nameless One's throne room in the first place. Any one orc looks a lot like any other. The key to telling them apart is to remember the patterns of the scars across their faces. "Does he now?" Groen replied. He smiled thinly from behind his beard and then slipped into bluff mode. "Did he send some contracts for us to sign?" "That depends," the orc said. "Where is the head of the dragon?" "It was too heavy to carry," Groen replied. "But we brought you some of her scales. Will that do?" "Da boss said..." "The boss wanted us to kill the dragon, which we did," Groen lied. "He got what he wanted. So why does he need the head?" "Him wanted it on the wall." "I've been in that throne room of his," the dwarf said. "There's not enough space for a taxidermised dragon's head. But what about the scales? We have half a dozen of them. You could use them to line the walls or to stop scuff marks on the obsidian floor." The orc said. If it was an impression of Guzd, it wasn't a very good one. "This is a trick." "Not at all," Groen said. "Give us 10 minutes to pack our equipment and we'll give you a hand. Guzd here will deliver them to your door if you ask him nicely." Orcs are incapable of doing anything nicely. The hoax went off without a hitch, and the band could only assume that Cerise had followed through with their suggestion to fly to the Far East. If she'd stuck around, it would have been hard to hide the devastation that she wrought on the Welsh farmlands, and the Nameless One would have known the lie for what it was. But if the Dark Lord knew about the hoax, he wasn't letting on. He sent the contracts a couple of days after receipt of the dragon scales. Yeva wanted to get a lawyer to look over them, but Groen didn't have any money. Steve didn't know any lawyers, and Vlad said there was only room for one blood-sucking monster in the band's inner circle. Instead, they each read through the contracts under the watchful eyes of the orcs before signing on the bottom line.
That was the latest instalment of Monsters of Rock by myself, Dane Cobain. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound, and this is Symbulus with Menticide.
Put the mic and very much hear how it's going to sound.
Begin to unravel, losing connection to the earth. Army of addicts chasing distraction, medicated so we don't wake up. asleep to sing, to yawn, whisper and dream. The wind flowing inside of you makes you whole. An onion's peel won't do, sheltering a home. Oh, a waltzing tree chains memories from her to me, to you. The sky's a dancer, we're here. Its motion as it flies, a shame you weird from old rain. From them into us, we breathe it all back to the world. We flail the swim, we remain. Sky's a dancer, we're here. Its motion as it flies, a shame you weird from old rain. It journeys away where we are forced to stay, our sojourn.
That was Air by Eyefall, and before that we had Menticide by Symbulus. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and it's time for us to be joined in conversation now by this week's guest, who is Eyefall / Caio Cortonesi.
What was the last book that you read, and what did you think of it?
Well, I'm actually currently reading a book by Chris Hadfield, the Canadian astronaut who was commander of the International Space Station, which is like I tend to read lots of nonfiction books. Despite being a fiction writer myself, most of the literature that I consume is nonfiction. And before that, I read Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, which again, considering the period that the book was written, I read more for this like an interest in the psychology of the characters, but also of course the her style, which is absolutely beautiful.
Cool. Awesome. Well, you mentioned writing as well, which we'll come on to in a little bit. Obviously, the interesting thing with you is that you're a multi-talented creative. You do a lot of different disciplines. And I wondered, how would you describe yourself first and foremost?
I think like a multimedia artist is a very good definition. I work primarily in music and film. There's a huge overlap between those. But I'm also a writer, and I think that there's tremendous connection between those three areas of my creativity. So I think that multimedia artist, I think, was probably the most accurate.
Cool. Well, I read somewhere as well that I think music and language, they both use similar parts of the brain as well. So perhaps that's another reason why they're sort of all intertwined and why you find it easy to go from one to another.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also, language has a very important role in songwriting. For example, if you're writing lyrics, the rhythm of spoken word, and also languages, many languages tend to have a melody of its own. So it does influence the way we think about our music.
Hmm. Yep. And I suppose storytelling as well is kind of a common theme across the music, the film, and the writing as well. How important is storytelling to what you do, whether it is directing a film or whether it is working on some music?
I think that storytelling is kind of everything in all art forms, even if you're not using words, even if you're like as an instrumental song. Needless to say, in filmmaking as well, because we're always trying to tell a story, we're always trying to build a certain image in people's minds. We try to etch something that it's just like language, like the written word is a bit of a magical thing, because when you read someone's book, you're literally hearing a voice inside your head reading it for you. And artists, what we try to do, we try to create, we try to evoke imagery or stories or characters or emotions in other people's minds, and there's always an element of storytelling to that.
Yeah. Well, I noticed on your website, I think you describe yourself as a creator of worlds. And I wondered, can you tell us a bit about some of the worlds that you've created?
Oh, yes, I think that writing fiction is specifically, I really like the complexity of coming up with an entirely fleshed out set of motivations for characters and the whole world that it exists. Like my latest novel that I published, first in Brazil in Portuguese, and then in English. It's called The Non Island. It tells, it is in two parts. The first half of it is a completely fantasy book that imagines a world where Native Americans crossed the ocean before crossed the Atlantic before Europeans did.
Mm.
So basically, they made first contact with Africans and Europeans before the Europeans did, and a lot of Native American mythologies and their whole worldview, the whole cosmology is kind of true. So it's a little bit almost like the Odyssey, but
Yeah.
using Native American elements. And the second half of the book is much more fictional. It takes place in our reality. It takes place in the world that as it is. But of course, but using characters that are fictional, based on real people and real events. But of course, you have to imagine the entire world that exists within those characters in order to make a strong and compelling story.
Yeah. I like that. That's an interesting point that you have, I suppose, the two different types of creating a world. One is creating, let's say something like Tolkien with Middle Earth, and you've created an entire world, as it were. But also it's equally true that when you've got a book that's set in our reality, in our time, you're still creating somebody's internal world, or you're creating the characters around them as well. So yeah, it's kind of interesting to combine the two. And you mentioned that you've got your book that, so is it the same book? It started in Portuguese. Did you translate it into English yourself?
Yes, exactly. I translated it myself. It was published in Brazil by a publishing house, and then I self-published it in English because I live in England now, so I think it's
Mhm.
fair. It was a fair process, a natural thing for me to translate it into English, which was actually very challenging because a lot of the
Yeah.
vocabulary uses Native American words and everything. But I translated it myself.
Well, that's really interesting as well, because presumably it involves a different set of skills to write it in the first place in one language, and then to the translation is presumably a sort of a different kind of a completely different thing. I wouldn't know. I've never translated something. So what was that process like for you to translate it?
Yeah, it is interesting that usually translating is a whole skill of it. When you tend to have, like in literature, you have writers who are extremely specialized in translating, and it can be extremely complex because language is something that changes over time, is something that changes from individual to individual. So I think that I really enjoyed translating it myself because I could try to stay as true as possible to the original without and I had there's no way that I could just blame someone else if the translation was really poor. I had to deal with the challenge of the translation myself, which was incredibly challenging despite being a short book. Let's say it was fun. It was something that I enjoyed doing, but I don't really want to do that again.
Yeah. It's funny. I read because I've been trying to improve my French, and I've read a little bit in French. And there was something I was reading not too long ago where one of the characters was a child, and so they'd translated that, and it was really interesting to see how because in English they'd kind of the kid wasn't quite speaking proper English because he was a kid and he was still learning, and they'd sort of done this. They'd done a similar thing in French, and you could kind of just about pick it up, but as a non-native French speaker, it was really interesting to see how they'd like tweak the language to make it sound like how French must sound if you're, a 3-year-old child and you can't quite pronounce the words properly as well. But again, I imagine you could kind of enlighten us on that from a translator's point of view. That must be one of the challenges there to replicate that kind of language that isn't really,
absolutely.
It's not really the formal sort of, what you would learn at school, maybe.
Exactly. It's and also if you're learning a language, that is so important as well to see different ways of including the wrong ones, because like on day to day in like people the way people use English is different from the way we actually learn at school to use English. So and using and translating a book, you have to take all of that into account. So you need to have such a deep knowledge of the languages you're working with that it's something that it takes a tremendous effort. There was this Brazilian book that had just been translated into German for the second time, and the professor who translated it, he took like 15 years to translate this single book because it's so complex, and he had such a deep understanding of the German language and of the Portuguese language in order to butcher the language in the right ways, in order to translate it into German, and it's absolutely fascinating, very complex.
Yeah, for sure. I think just on that as well, and we'll move on to some of your other disciplines in a minute. But I've heard as well, it's similar with poetry in terms of if you're trying to translate poetry, it's so difficult because there are so many words that have multiple meanings, and then if you're trying to maintain as much of the kind of the rhyming structure or the poetic meter. I mean, you mentioned earlier the idea of the sound of language itself and the natural rhythm of language. So if you're translating poetry, even if you get the specific meaning spot on, you're still losing part of that rhythm as well. So it's, I think in some ways, and you kind of touched on this, I think in some ways it can be just as much of a challenge, if not more, to translate something than to write it. And it needs that same level of creativity.
Yes, I think that with poetry is probably even more because for poetry, the form is so important. So you have and the form is very specific to the language. So if you're gonna take like a Shakespeare, like an iambic pentameter, it's something that only makes sense in English. You cannot translate it into a Latin language, for example, keeping that same structure. Like this is simply doesn't exist in other languages. Yep. So and you have to choose. You have to I'm gonna have to change the form of the writing of the original into something that a native reader of this other language, Spanish, French, Japanese, can understand as coming from roughly the right place, perhaps the same period as the original was written. So if you're translating a medieval poem, you're going to translate into what the language sounded in the Middle Ages, for example, in order to evoke the same kind of notion of a period, a certain notion, the same notion of a certain social class as well. That is very language specific. So poetry, I think it's pretty much impossible to translate in a satisfactory manner. I think I think that the reader needs to kind of learn the language in order to be able to fully and to read the original in order to be able to fully understand what a poem means.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so let's go on to some of your sort of producing and directing. First off, I know you've worked on a bunch of different music videos. I wondered if you could tell us what are some of your favorite music videos that you've worked on?
Oh, I have produced so many because that's how I transitioned. Because I started in music, and I wanted to transition into film.
Hmm.
So, and the way that I started doing that was especially to try to get some to try to pay my bills by doing that, was to talk to artists that I was working with as a music producer and say, hey, do you want to make a music video?
Hmm.
So, and I got to do, and as a language, of course, it is what I love about music videos specifically is because it's you don't really have that there are not many set rules. You do have like little rules in all sorts of visual arts, but there you don't have like very set rules. So you can be really experimental with the visuals. You can be really experimental with the structure, and I do have quite a few music videos that I'm extremely proud of. I'd say probably some of those are from my own that I wasn't that I did for myself, like from my own solo project. I have like this solo project that I release music under, which is called Eiffel. There are a couple of those that I'm very proud of.
You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. I'm here in conversation with Caio Cortonesi, and this is Eiffel with Temple of You.
They will pierce holes through you that will burn and swallow what's around. You'll watch that void grow. What was before will feel far away, and wherever and whenever you look, their tastes will be coming through. But you know, as awful as they may be, the holes will never be unknown, unless you choose, unless you let them within me. I have a temple of you. Within me, I have a temple to love. Within me, now I am trying to see you.
was Temple of You by Eiffel. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and we are joined now in conversation by Caio Cortonesi.
Yeah, cool. And how did that lead into the short films? And you also sort of acted in a few of them as well. Is that just because you needed sort of an extra body, or is that another sort of passion that you have as well?
I do enjoy acting quite a bit. I also did some acting once I first moved to the UK. I love acting because to me acting is a form of practical psychology. You have to come up with this the psychological background of a character and kind of inhabit it in a way in order to be able to create to evoke the emotions that in order to create something plausible using your body. But I would say probably one of the main reasons in my own films that I acted in my own films also is because there's a way to save money, really, because we don't have huge funds, and I end up doing loads of things because I end up doing like in all of my own films. I also did I was a director of photography. I composed the music. I do the whole post production. As much as possible, not because I'm a control freak, just because when you don't have a lot of money at hand, that's something that you do to make things happen.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And so you mentioned your music as well. What instruments do you play, and how do you record it all, and all of that stuff?
So as a musician, I play several instruments. I started with the guitar, but I can also play the drums. I can play I can play the piano, keyboard, bass, guitar, saxophone, violin, and whatever gets thrown at me. Really, I have worked with some ethnic music as well. Like so, I ended up like playing piles and piles of percussion instruments and woodwinds and instruments that I don't even know what they're called. What they're called, but it's I love just taking an instrument I've never played. One instrument that I loved playing once, I only had a chance to play once is a koto, which is that big Japanese instrument. Is kind of like the Japanese harp. So I think that and the way I approach my it is I'm also a singer as well. The way I approach it is I try to have my knowledge as flexible as possible so that I can try to apply to different instruments quickly if I need to, if I'm like writing an arrangement and I have to make like a banjo arrangement or some instrument I've never played. But in order to be able to be flexible enough to kind of at least play it in a reasonable way so that I can make the arrangement and record it, while not becoming really an excellent player, but I can actually deliver something for that specific project.
Cool. And you mentioned you release it under the name Eiffel. What's the reason behind that? Is it just to keep it sort of separate from your other things, or?
Yes, actually, I have this. Lots of people get confused because my name, the name I use as a film director and writer, I use is Caio Cortonesi. Caio Cortonesi, which is my dad's family name. But as a musician, I use Caio Duarte, which is a different name. And lots of people always found it confusing, but I always try to keep things separate. A lot of people in music don't know that I'm also a filmmaker, and a lot of people in film that I've worked with, they don't know that I also work with music, because I like to keep things separate. I don't like having a little bit of that. Oh, so this is that music guy who's trying to make it in film and stuff. It's a little bit like alter ego in a way, like Clark Kent and Superman. And the same thing with Eiffel. I came up with this little project of mine a long time ago, because I wanted to make a type of music that I've never made before. Because I'm known for producing lots of rock bands, lots of metal bands, and I wanted to go, in a completely different direction. I wanted to do like electronic, ethnic jazz, and I wanted to do everything myself. So from playing every single instrument, shooting the music videos myself, doing everything alone. And then when I did that, I was like, I don't want to release it under my name. I think it's a little bit like, I try to conceal my face with Eiffel. So in the music videos, you don't see my face. In the promo pictures, you don't see my face. Always to try to keep things separate, because I do like to keep like those different sides of my work and all of myself a little bit separate. And since then, I started to use that name iFall also when I write film music. So that's one of my many pseudonyms that I use.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Okay, so and in terms of all these different things that you do, are you available for commission work? Can people hire you, whether it is as a writer, a musician, a composer, a director, a producer? Are you available for hire?
Absolutely. I have a recording studio, a small home studio here in Wickham. It's called Broadband Studio. If you look for it on Google, you're gonna see it. Which is just a small home studio, like my main studio back in my home country. I'm Brazilian. I still haven't really put up, the kind of infrastructure I want to, but eventually that will happen. So I'm a music producer, do mixing, mastering, commission work, also arrangements, and I write music for films. But I'm also a director. I can of music videos. I've done lots of advertising in the past. I directed lots of ads, social media content as well. So very easy to reach, and I can add a lot of value to in many different ways that you may need.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Okay. I'm not sure whether you'll be happy to tell us about this, but I hear you received your best ever Christmas present this year. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yes, my second son was born shortly before Christmas. We're actually expecting it for between Christmas and New Year's, and we were very
Okay.
nervous about the practicalities of it.
Mm,
But he ended up coming a little bit before, a few weeks before we expected. So right now I'm a bit like on a paternity leave. It's little sleep deprived. But yeah, it's an amazing experience. And actually, my last record as iFall that I released last year, I wrote it for my children because this is my second one, and that's an album that I wrote. Every song is like having a conversation with them,
mhm,
including to this one who had just been born, who but already existed in my mind.
mhm.
So I read the latest record, which is called Stillness and Trust, was written thinking about them. And man, I had to say, I don't know if you have kids yourself, but it's
Not
an
yet.
absolutely, yeah, it's an absolute transformational experience. It really, really changes the way you perceive yourself and your place in the world.
Yeah. And in terms of obviously you've got all of these different creative endeavors going. You've got your family life as well. How do you sort of stay productive and focused with so much going on?
Well, currently, I haven't been that productive when you're not sleeping well at night. But I think that one thing, the whole reason why I do so many things is because I am always excited about doing something new. So there were periods in my life where I spent like long stretches of time working on a single project, like a film, something really big, or like producing lots of records, one and then back to back. And then after that, it starts getting kind of samey, and but the excitement of thinking, oh, once I'm done with this album, once I deliver this, I'll be able to write a new screenplay, or
Yeah.
and then when I started, it's kind of starting fresh again, and I have to relearn, I have to remember how to do those things that I haven't done in a while. And I think that this diversification of what I do, at least for the way I work, the way like my mind works,
Mm,
it really helps with staying motivated. But in terms of productivity, I'd say one thing that I always say is don't take things too seriously, especially if you're a creative. You have to let go at one
yeah.
point, and the more you do that, the more you go. You don't obsess too much about a project. You just go, okay, let me wrap this one up. Let's go to the next one. The better you get at it. So to get to the end of things, which is something that many creatives struggle with,
Mm,
and sometimes you do have to kind of let go of something, and then start something new. And the more you do that, the better you get at getting to the end of every project that you start. Which I think it's important. Creating is making decisions, is about
mm,
decision making. tiny decisions, a whole small sequence of decisions that you make. If you're making a painting, you have to decide on what pen am I going to use, what color am I going to use, how it's going to be. And the less you obsess about individual things and think more about the larger picture, the easier it gets to find your way until the end of whatever you're creating. If it's a book, if it's a painting, if it's a sculpture, if it's a movie, if it's a stage play, that helps a lot.
Cool. Okay, and just to finish up on, it's kind of two questions in one. So, what's next for you? What have you got planned in 2026? And where can people follow you to stay up to date?
Yes, right now I am. There's a short film I'm trying to finish. I started it a while ago. My life, so many things happen in my life that I still haven't been able to. That's the one thing that I haven't finished, that I'm keen to finish. I also have two books in the works. One is a novel. The other one is a nonfiction book about the arts market that I want to start working on as soon as possible. We'll see how things are going to go, if I can get it commissioned, because nowadays with AI and it's getting more and more difficult to get interest in written content, which is extremely sad. People are reading less and less, but we have to keep trying, right? I hear you're a writer yourself, so I think you can certainly you can certainly relate with that. And you can find me easily. The name of my studio is Broadband Studio. You can just go on Google. Here it's here in High Wycombe. And my name is Caio Cortonesi, CAIO Cortonesi, CORTONESI. If you Google my name, you can find my personal website. There are plenty of my films and music videos on YouTube. If you want to listen to some of my music, I recommend searching for iFall, IFALL, which is a bit of a joke with my first name. And it's on Spotify and all over the place. So it's quite easy to find.
Big thank you to Caio Cortonesi for joining me. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wycombe Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this is I Fall with Mount Mistake.
obscene, gentle memories. I brought you to this stage just to share it with you. You'll always be the best thing that I've ever seen. Hey old man, where did your father go? Did he grow old in his time, or did you just let him go? He was baptized by fire, now he's just waiting for the snow. Hanging on to what he's got, trying to take it slow. I know you have time, don't you pass it up. Balancing on wires, waiting for the sun to come up. There were lights in those houses, now they're bodied up. A warm retreat for a family, now they're just crumbling down to dust. Their voices linger as I wander through the street. If these walls could listen, what stories would they keep? What is life if you don't continue to grow? Self-medication and build your comfort zone. I know you have time, don't you pass it up. Balancing on wires, waiting for the sun to come up. There were lights in those houses, now they're bodied up. A warm retreat for a family, now they're just crumbling down to dust. Whoa, whoa. I can't make it on my own. One day we'll find the pieces that make us whole. Our roots run deep once we've grown. Soon enough we'll call this house a home. This feels like home, feels like home, feels like home. Whoa, feels like home, feels like home. Oh, this feels like home, feels like home, feels like home. Whoa, feels like home.
Houses by Nick Byrne, and before that we had Mount Mistake by Eyefall. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and it's time for us to head over to the Ilk Shed now to catch up with Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review.
Wire on Returning, 1977 to 1979. A CD I bought for £6 at Scorpion Records in High Wycombe, which used to be where Sainsbury's now is, and was famously next to a pizza shop called the Leaning Tower of Pizza. I'm not sure if I ever heard the first track on this album at the time, but I know I would have quite liked it. It was recorded live at the Roxy, a club in Covent Garden which hosted most of the early punk bands, and it was a time when I was desperate to hear more of that fast, angry sound, for which the Damned had whetted my appetite. Now it just sounds like a bad recording of some punks in a youth club. Wire released their first major label album towards the end of punk's first rush, and I was not particularly impressed. In fact, I was quite puzzled why it got a lot of critical acclaim at the time. I thought punk records should have an overwhelming amount of guitars, and Pink Flag by Wire just had lots of short songs, all with underwhelmingly distorted guitars, and with clean bass and perfectly audible drums. The guitars do not seem organic, they sound like they are coming from a different time and place. There are a few instances where you can start to hear some choppy post-punk-like rhythms, but the voices consistently use that Johnny Rotten London punk accent that was so popular amongst their contemporaries. I became more interested in Wire when they released a couple of very odd but still almost commercial singles. These songs, The Fly and Dot Dash, were poppy and jerky like early XTC, and they had puzzling structures that made them stick out from the usual verse, chorus and bridge structures that even the punks seemed to be slaves to. I heard the song Outdoor Miner, which I loved. It has harmony vocals that sounded a bit like Don't Fear the Reaper, and it has a great tune which was quite catchy. I can't remember if it was a hit or not, but it got a lot of radio play. After that, Wire dropped off my radar till one day I found Pink Flag in the library, but I still did not get it. When I found this compilation in Scorpion Records for only £6, and I knew it had the 3 tracks I like, I decided to give them another go. Apart from the first track, the CD covers their first 3 albums. The second and third albums see them abandon the simple distorted guitars and Johnny Rotten vocal stylings. The guitars are sharper and more forceful and are better placed in the mix. The singing is much more melodic and the drums explore different rhythms. The second 2 albums, 154 and Chairs Missing, are 2 that I look for when I go to record fairs. On Returning, Wire.
Big thank you to Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album review. Thank you to Caio Cortonesi for being this week's guest. Thank you to everyone whose music I've shared. As always, you can find me on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. We are repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please do leave us a short review on your podcast platform of choice. It all helps. And you can email me here at the studio by dropping me a line on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain @wickhamsound.org.uk. So I'm going to leave you with one last tune, and this is Big Sky Orchestra with Rose Tinted Shades. I'll catch you next week.
I'm gonna buy me Stingray, might just crash you for the thrill. Baby, no time, I've been living up in the hill. Oh yes, I'm gonna deal with the devil, might just give him 20 bills. If I only got 10, will you please pay the rest of my bill? I've been thinking about giving up on this old man, living carefree like they do down in FLA. Oh yes, I'm gonna get on a health kick. Make my body feel so fine. Maybe I do that, maybe I screw that. Stay drunk all the time. Oh no.